Welcome to the Left of Str8 Show, where we talk entertainment, music, books, foodies, and more each week with special guest interviews of interest to the LGBTQ community and our straight allies. Direct from the entertainment capital of Northeast Ohio. Your host, Scott Fullerton, chats with some of your favorite entertainers, celebrities, newsmakers, and behind-the-scenes people across the country and around the world who make it all happen. So sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and let's start talking.
Everyone, welcome back to the Left of Str8 Show, the podcast that celebrates the diverse voices and experiences of our LGBT community and straight allies. I'm your host, as always, Scott Fullerton, and today I have another great guest to interview for you. We became social media friends on Facebook, where we had mutual friends such as Josh Sabara and Stephen Fales, who've both been on the show. I started out being impressed by his accomplishments as an artist and a writer. That quickly devolved into jealousy of a who's who of notable celebrities and musicians he's had encounters with. I'm thrilled to welcome Geoffrey Dicker to the show for the very first time. He's a talented artist and writer. He's captured audiences with unique creativity and thought-provoking work. And his journey as an independent artist and author has been both inspiring and relatable with his work that we'll definitely talk about. I definitely love getting to know him through some of his amazing pieces of art, some of the books. He's published 12 books on his own here. So please welcome to the Left of Str8 Show for the very first time, Mr. Geoffrey Dicker. Geoffrey, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Scott, for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really appreciative. We've talked off air, and like I said, we've been social media friends. We know a lot of the same people. I've been so impressed with your art and your books and everything that you've accomplished so far. But I'm a pop culture junkie. And like I said, you've had pictures and autographs with anyone who's everyone. So that just kind of presses my hot button. So I'm so excited to be able to talk to you today. You're calling in from LA today, right?
I am. I'm in West Hollywood.
Very, very cool. Well, I do like to always start our interviews with someone that's first time on the show, getting a little information about him. So why don't you share with my listeners, where did you actually grow up and what kind of a kid were you growing up?
Sure. I grew up in Southern California, and my mom recently uncovered she saved all my school art projects, and it turns out that she just discovered, and I hadn't seen it for 40 years. Sorry to date myself here. I discovered my first painting, which was, funnily enough, and again, I hadn't seen this in 40 years. It was abstract and very colorful. So clearly I had some sort of subliminal, programming back in the day.
There you go. A pattern emerges early on. I love that. Very cool.
I was creative a little bit, and then I suppressed it for most of my childhood. And then in my late 20s, I sort of rediscovered it again, and I never jumped off the path since. So,
I love that. That's amazing. And the next question I like to ask all my first timers is, you're a proud member of our LGBTQ community. Talk to me about, when did you come out to yourself? Maybe who's the first person you told? And where have you really found your LGBTQ tribe, if you've found a tribe yet?
Well, one thing I have to say is, when I was, and this is a true story, when I was 5, I used to listen to the radio obsessively, and for the first time when I heard Prince, and the song Controversy was out, and although I didn't understand completely everything he was talking about, he did basically, the gist of that song is basically like, it's okay to be you, and I went, oh my God, there's more people like me out there, because I couldn't put my finger on it, and in those days, it wasn't about categorizing who you are and what you are. It was more of I just had a feeling that I was different, and I couldn't explain it. growing up in Orange County, California, you know, it's a Republican conservative neighborhood area. So I always just tried to suppress it, and I always tried to just hope that eventually I would be normal like everybody else. And you know, I tried to date girls, and it just didn't feel right. And you know, the first time I kissed a guy, I went, this is the right thing, you know. So when I was in college, my good friend Sark, we sort of explored all the first gay things together, going to clubs and you know, just even talking about like what is going on with us, like how come everyone else is this and we're this, and you know, just and it was like extremely helpful, and you know, we got through it.
That's amazing. And did you kind of find a tribe in college? Are you still searching for your tribe, or where did you kind of feel part of the LGBTQ community after that time with your friend?
I mean, of course, I'm super proud to be gay and out, and but I would still say I'm still searching for my tribe. A lot of, you know, I'm not a big particular fan of RuPaul's Drag Race, and I also love classic rock. So I don't feel that there's any bucket that you can put me in, other than, you know, like I said, I'm very proud to be gay, and I'm a creative. So I just it's kind of fluid, you know, in that respect.
Right. Well, we talked off air. I mean, there is no one way to be gay, right? And there's like you said, there's the drag queen gays, and there's the club people, and have to go out every night. Creative, creative introvert, or kind of introverted. I'm very introverted as doing this. I love doing my podcast, talking to people all over the world, but I hibernate. I don't really go out that much unless I'm going out with a group of friends, and I have a very small group of friends. So I definitely hear where you're coming from there. I want to talk about, I mean, both your books and your art. You are a prolific writer. You've had 12 published books. Talk about when you first started writing, and what's kind of led you to all these books.
Yeah, well, so this is like kind of funny. I a book which I recommend to everybody. It's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. People had been recommending that book to me for years, and I kept saying, "Oh, I'm going to do something about it," and I kept not doing anything about it. And I was at a crossroads in my life, and I swear to God, this is true. I still have the flyer someplace. Um, I was Someone had just recommended that book, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to get it." And then, you know, people say that and then they don't. Well, I was coming out of the gym that day, and there was a flyer of she. I guess she was doing a talk someplace in LA, and the flyer flew around, had tire marks on it, and landed right under my front door of my car. So I went down to pick it up, and I went, "Oh my God, that's a sign." So so the book doesn't tell you how to write; it tells you why to write, and it gives you some suggestions of things to do. And what I found was you start keeping a journal, and you know, it just it's very disciplined, very religious. You must write every single day. It doesn't matter what the topic is. But what I found was after a while you have nothing else to talk about because you've done all the journal stuff, you've done all the this pisses me off, and you've done all the this is what I love. And the next thing you know, you're like, what if Joe and Mary do this? And then the next thing you know, you've got a story, and it's kind of awesome. And another thing that's really wonderful about it is if you write, they suggest writing 3 pages a day, but so let's just say you write 3 pages a day. Well, in 1 month, you've got 90 pages.
Right.
In 2 months, you have most of a book. In 3 months, you have a full book. If you stick to that, and of course, there's nuances to that, but as an overall thing, 3 months of your life, and you have a book. So why not? That's the way I looked at it, you know? So.
That's fantastic. And you've gone through all genres. You've done poetry, you've done stories, you've done scripts. What is there anything you're particularly drawn to anymore? Are you more into the story element? Are you more in the poetry kind of free thinking, or you keep doing both? Or what are you drawn to
I
these days?
Lately I've been doing novels. I have my stack of books next to
Nice.
me. Um, I tend to be into novels these days. Just because like it's fun to just explore a character and see where they go and things like that. And you know, I like to sometimes give you a Stephen King type ending where you think you know where it's going to go, and then it goes in a different direction and things like that. I was inspired by that as a child, so I decided to do that in my own work. But yeah, I do have, I call it creative ADD, where like one day I'm onto this, the next thing I'm onto that. So
I love that. I've been very lucky to have some phenomenal writers of screenplays and books and everything else here. And it all does come down to the character for them and a lot of things. For most of the writers I talk to, if you're writing novels or plays or screenplays, it is all character driven. You ever have a character that's really stuck with you or someone you just had to keep writing about?
I actually, I mean, a couple of my books could technically turn into sequels, but I just tend not to. I want to just move on to the next story and next idea. But I don't know. That's just a personal preference.
That makes sense. And how much do you write from personal experience? Is it all just kind of coming to you free thought, or do you kind of take different things? Because you've lived all over the country. I mean, in some of the major cities, LA, Chicago, New York. Do these come from your past, or where do these stories come from?
I mean, I wrote one that was inspired by a job that I had once. I took basically a lot of times what I do is I take the ending that I make the ending that I want, as opposed like in times, the ending you were given in life is not necessarily happy, and then I'll like take it and turn it into something different. So there's a lot of inspiration from my own life, but not everything. And I mean, I wrote a book called Journal of Grievances, which it's told in a journal format. So it's a person's journal for a year, and it's a struggling writer about to turn 40, which was me. That part is true, and the person had a lot of sexual experiences, which I lived in New York at the time, and that was true. But then that was like my basis and my jumping off point, and then it turned into like a million different directions that are not true, and even a couple scenarios where I had to hook up with somebody and I didn't like the way it ended, and so now in the book it got to have a happier ending, or an ending that suited me better.
I like that. That's great. Write your own story, create your own ending kind of deal. I like that a lot. And talk about that moving around. I mean, like you said, you were born and raised in California. You're back in California now. You have had experience in Chicago and New York. What kind of has drawn you to these other cities?
I mean, they were both kind of whims. New York, I was about to be laid off, and from a job I had for a long time, and I was breaking up with the boyfriend that I had for a long time, and I was kind of like, what do I do? And literally, I mean, sometimes in my life, it seems like I'm making stuff up because it almost sounds too magical, but I swear I have receipts for everything. But it at a time when I was like, what am I going to do? A friend of mine who I knew he used to live in Los Angeles and he moved to New York. He called me out of the blue and said, why don't you come visit me? There's a vacancy in my building, and why don't you move? And I said, well, I've never been to New York before. And so and again, I swear to God, this is true. On the phone, he said to me, why don't you book your trip right now? And for whatever reason, I walked over to my computer and booked a plane ticket. And so I visited him in late December, and I moved in January, 3 weeks later. So, and then everyone's like, oh, you can just check it out and see how you feel. And I lived there for 13 years. So it ended up being an interesting mistake, or risk, I should say.
I've told you off air that I would love to have lived in New York. I'm kind of a vagabond myself. I've lived in, I think, 13 places since I was 18. And New York is not one of them. And I wish I would have done it when I was younger, because it's really a younger man's game. You have to hustle while you're there. Did you find it enjoyable while you were? I mean, you were there for 13 years, so obviously you liked it. But was it a grind every single day, or were you able to kind of get yourself into a groove eventually?
Yeah, I was able to get it. I almost chickened out once I was there. I was about 5 months in, and I was like not going anywhere. I wasn't finding a job. I wasn't finding friends. I was living outside of the city, and I basically I was going to actually book a trip to visit my family, which I'm pretty sure would have been the tail between my legs, I'm coming home. And that day, I was going to book a trip. I had asked my dad at the time if they were around the following week, because I was going to come visit. And that day, a job that I had applied for, they called me in for an interview. So I wasn't able to, and the interview would be for that week I was supposed to go travel. So it was like the universe was sort of looking out for me to say, don't give up just yet, And yes, to answer the second part of your question, it was a complete grind. I think of certain people that, stayed in the same job that they had. And, in that amount of time that were in my career, sort of, I don't have a lot to show for it. And those people that stayed in the same spot, they're VPs now, making tons of money every year and living the life. So, I actually, but thinking about it, I wouldn't trade it, because the experiences I had were so rich that you couldn't buy them.
I can relate to that. Like I said, I've lived a lot of places. I've worked a lot of different jobs. And you look back at it, yeah, I probably could be a lot farther along than I am now, but the experiences are something you can't cash in, right? I mean, one of
Absolutely.
my first jobs when I was like 20 years old was working for Capitol Records. And I used to go down to Capitol Records in Hollywood and have some amazing experiences there. I wish I would have stayed there. I probably would have been very well off by now, but it's like I had so many other experiences since then, I wouldn't have traded that for the world. So I understand exactly where you're coming from.
There was a time in my life where I had just gotten laid off. It was when I was living in New York, and I got laid off. I was having a difficulty finding another job. And at the same time, all these like crazy experiences were coming to me. And so I'd be at some party and meeting some really world famous person. And, we would have a conversation and I would take a photo. And in the photo, I've got a big smile on. And inside I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So it's interesting that, sometimes a photo really, doesn't capture what's happening before and after. It's just that moment.
That's true. It's just, they say that it just captures a slice of life, and that is true. Well, you talk about that. Let's kind of delve into that. You talk about you've been to all these parties, you have all these amazing photographs. I think you have just like thousands of photographs with you and different celebrities throughout the years. Talk about how you got into that and how those things came about. It's just amazing, some of the things I've seen your photographs just following me on social media.
Yeah. So long story short, when my brother and I were children, my parents wanted to keep us away from drugs. So they got us into baseball cards, which the natural progression for that was going to baseball games, because we lived near the California Angels Stadium. And so one day we were at one of the games, and the parking lot was just filled with cars. We're waiting for everybody to leave. And so we parked ourselves in this one particular spot, and it turns out it was where all the players walked out. And we just had this like aha moment of like, we should get our cards signed. So being that my brother and I are like, obsessive, the next thing you know, we were going to every game and meeting all the players and doing all these things, and going to the hotels where they stayed at, and just doing little kid things that, probably I don't know if any other kids that were doing those kinds of things actually, but we had the childlike innocence. And I mean, and again, this is the 1980s, and my mom, we would sit at the hotels. My mom was really cool, and she would go with us because, she kind of wanted to keep an eye on us and things like that. And she loved seeing the players too. So, she would strike up a conversation with everybody. And like, the next thing you know, she'd be like, well, we're driving to the ballpark. Do you want to ride? And so my mom would give all these players rides to the ballpark, and they'd give us free tickets. And I mean, we have unfortunately, this was before cameras or, digital cameras. So I don't have tons of photos of that, but for anyone that collects baseball cards, my brother and I have the 1987 and 1988 Fleer sets completely autographed, which is 660 cards each. Anyway, needing somebody for my set, that led us to going to some celebrity. There was an event where there was baseball players and celebrities at it, and my mom, being the most friendly person, started talking to some guy, and it turns out that guy was a celebrity autograph collector. And we exchanged numbers, and he sort of showed us the ropes, and we were collecting we started collecting autographs. So and again, this is the 80s and 90s before cameras and stuff like that. So before they would televise all these events, they would just have, they would rope off a little section for fans, and all the celebrities would come over and sign autographs, and it was just a different world. And then I kind of reached a point where I had met everybody at that time, and then I kind of moved on with life. And then when I moved to New York, I started going out. I'm, as you know, hugely passionate about art and music, and in New York, it's everywhere. And I was working at a news station at the time, and I was seeing how news just develops and how people get the story and all these things. And it made me realize maybe I should do that. I mean, it's a passion of mine. I love art and music. Maybe I should write about art and music. I'm kind of going to these things anyway. Might as well just, put it down. And so I started carrying a camera because I wanted to take the photo, of the event that I was at. And then it just led me to being in these weird situations where I would be someplace and a celebrity would be there. And so I'd have a conversation with them, ask them all my questions that I wanted to ask. And then I ended it with a photo. And so multiply that times 13 years of going out almost every night of the year.
Wow.
And I have thousands and thousands of pictures and experiences and memories.
That is absolutely amazing. I told you off air that I used to, being from LA, the same thing. I used to go to all the cool places because you kind of knew where the celebrities were. They go to these different places. And it was before the internet, right? When everyone was saying where everyone was at, and nobody was twittering where they're going to be and everything. So they felt a lot more freer, a lot more comfortable to talk to people. It wasn't quite as scary a time. And it was kind of fun because you really got to make some really good relationships that way, of people that were, even if it was 2 seconds, a hi, how are you? You didn't always get a picture because, like you said, there wasn't digital photography back then, unless you carried your little Kodak pocket thing or something or other. It was very difficult to do. What was probably one of your most fun fan moments, taking a picture that kind of was an interaction that stands out in your mind?
One of my favorite ones, Peter Gabriel. It's a long story, but one night, my friends and I listened to, it was the first time I'd ever heard a particular album of his, and it was like a life-changing night. And as many times I'd been meeting celebrities by this point and doing all these things, in my brain, it never occurred to me that one day I might actually meet him and get that CD signed. And then the moment happened, and it made me go, you have to just dream bigger. You have to dream. Every time you achieve a dream, you got to push it out and go further, So that was a big one for me. But I mean, there's been
awesome.
Tons. Yeah.
I love it. And one of the things that they follow you on social, Facebook at least, they'll see, I mean, you have you're wishing someone a happy birthday every day of the week. It reminds me very much of Josh Zabar, who's our mutual friend, who does the same thing. Josh is a publicist and marketing guy from way back and's worked with everyone who's anyone. But you kind of have all these moments, and it kind of gets you just to think about their stories, right? Every day you're thinking of a different story.
Yeah, I mean, I collected a few of up until I think this book came out in 2013. So up until it's called I Won the Internet, there's the center section is all these different celebrities, because for each day of the year, I've realized I've met someone who has a birthday that day, whether I've gotten their autograph or a photo with them. And then if I were to update this book, which I don't have any plans to at the moment, I could quadruple the amount of people, because again, I've met a lot of people since then.
That's amazing. Well, let's go into your art. It's abstract atmosphere is how you describe it. And as you said, you found this first picture that your mom showed you with all this color and shapes, and it is very abstract, very cool. We can see behind you these gorgeous works there. What draws you to, excuse the pun, what draws you to these shapes and these colors, and what's your process for doing these pieces of work?
Yeah, so for me, again, not realizing I had done all these works when I was a kid, and that because I had just recently seen them. When I moved to New York, there was two factors at play. One was a friend of mine gave me a set of paintbrushes as a going away present, and then as a second thing, when I got to my New York apartment, they told me I couldn't paint the walls, and it was just these. I had high ceilings, and it was like these stark white walls, and I had always painted wherever I lived and made it warmer and things like that. And they said I couldn't paint, and so it suddenly was like, well, I have these brushes and I can't paint, so I can hang pictures. So I literally walked into an art supply store, and I had this cylindrical. They were the paintbrushes were all rolled up or something, so it was like an apron almost, but it was like rolled up in a cylinder. So I walked in with my cylinder and I said, "Hi, I have this. What do I do?" They said, "Well, buy some canvas, buy some acrylic colors, and see what happens." And so I was like, okay. So I went home that night and I lit some candles and put some music on, and it was like, it's like in writing where it's almost as if someone's whispering, just do this, And so one color chooses the next, and I just kind of go. I mean, sometimes I have a plan and sometimes I don't. These in particular, my goal is to uplift the audience. So I choose bright colors, which is not always a thing that happens in art. And in with these abstract atmospheres, you can look at it from any direction.
I love that. Yeah.
And I encourage everybody who is a fan of my work to change up your space. Don't just always keep it this way. Change it, and then by changing it, you change your attitude and you change the way you view the world. And so it's been working out pretty well.
I love that. I mean, I'm very much a big proponent of changing your living space around. And with something like that, with 4 different walls and 4 different pictures, you could have about 28 different designs if you turn them one way and put them on different walls. That's amazing. I love that idea. So that's
Yeah,
very
and
cool.
I will always walk by and change things around, and move this one over there and move that one over there, and then turn this one upside down, and it's awesome. So it's like you just never view the world the same way twice. And I mean, that's something that has resonated with me because, living in New York and going to all these events and doing all these things, you can't view the world in a set way because it's not going to ever be that way. And I mean, especially in New York, for example, you wake up that morning, let's say you get tickets for a concert, and you buy them 6 months in advance. Well, the day of the show, you have, let's say, and it's an outdoor venue, the day of the show, it's pouring rain. So now you have to pivot because you have to decide, am I going to do this or am I going to not do this? Or now I've got to I was originally going to wear shorts, but now I've got to wear a raincoat. And, I was originally going to wear something cute and now I've got to wear something practical. And so the fact that it forces you to change into a different direction and pivot as it goes, that is very inspirational to me because it's happened so much. And you just have no choice but to just go with the flow. So,
Right.
And as a Virgo, I could tend to not go with the flow. I can tend to want to do everything the same. So it's good. It forces me out of that routine.
I love that. Very cool. Now, have you ever had any project go where you knew where it was going to go from start to finish? You had this in your mind and you painted it all the way through to the end? Or do you always just kind of able to go with that flow and see what your body creates?
Yeah, no, I definitely have pictured things in my head from start to finish. I find with books, it comes out almost more like it was in my head. Whereas painting, sometimes it's like I can see it, but I don't know how to do it.
Right.
And so, and I just recently watched the Wham documentary, and George Michael was talking about how he it was like he heard the song in his head and he knew it how it went. And so when it came time to record Careless Whisper, he knew how it went, and he worked with this really great producer. And when the producer worked with him, it didn't sound like the vision he had in his head. And he came back and said, even though I worked with this legendary producer, I have to redo this because this is not the vision I had. And everybody told him, "You're a fool. Don't do that. You worked with this legendary producer. Don't do that." And he said, "I've got to stay true to myself." And so the main thing, I guess, is staying true to myself. Where sometimes the lines may not be perfect. Sometimes the the colors may run or whatever the case may be, but it's truly genuine and heartfelt. I don't phone it in ever, whether it's my writing or my paintings. It's me 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched both. I was pleasantly surprised. I saw the Wham documentary and the Rock Hudson documentary the same week, and both of them were amazing. Just the fact it tells George Michael's story a lot more than I thought it would in there. I thought it was going to be more, but it really shows his process. Like you said, it was very cool. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. Talk about where are you drawn to more these days? Do you find yourself, like you said, when you're a writer, you write every day, 3 pages a day. When you're an artist, are you painting every day? Where does your kind of creative head go to these days? Where are you leaning?
Lately, I've been doing more painting. However, I wrote a book a while back, and I never got around to finishing it. And it actually was like completely written, but I had to edit it, and it was like sometimes the edit can take longer than writing the book, so I kind of let it sit down for a minute, and then I got distracted with other things. So I've just recently picked it back up, so I am working to finish that book. But lately, I've been painting much more, and I can sometimes, I mean, the limitation for me is space. They're not selling as much as I would like at the moment. So I have, out of camera range, I have stacks of paintings that are sitting there in my living room. As soon as they start to go, but I definitely paint every day nowadays. And I'm telling myself, just make it and, the audience will come.
There you go, listeners. You have a chance for a Geoffrey Dicker original here. You got to be
Yes.
able to hit him up at the end. Goodness gracious. Well, we talked about the celebrity, and you're a huge rock and roller. You've been to so many great concerts and everything. Have you ever attempted to do kind of like an abstract rock and roll picture or paint any of your artists or celebrities you've done? Are you into that at all, or is that just something you've never tried to go that direction?
No, everybody wants me to do that. Everybody wants me to do that, but I covered art before I was an artist myself, and every time I would go see something, what really turned me on was somebody doing something that I'd never seen before, and then it became a trend to take a picture of Marilyn Monroe, give her like a little, green, one streak of green hair, and then call that an original work. And I just don't find that personally rewarding. So I choose not to do that for my own thing. I have painted on top of some photographs that I've taken of rock stars, and that's something I'd like to explore more. But it's to make it look the best it can be. It's a quite expensive process. So and I'm also a little bit worried about litigious celebrities coming after me. I've seen that happen quite often these days. Now, all the photos I would be doing are my own. They're photos I've taken of them, but the gray area between, sometimes on the ticket stub it said no cameras allowed and you could sneak a camera in. Sometimes they just don't want their image in something that's not under their umbrella. So I will come back to that at some point. I just don't know when, and I feel like the timing isn't right just yet. But I do have a plan to do a photography exhibit, because I have hundreds of thousands of concert photos, and I recently unearthed like 25 really cool Fleetwood Mac photos that I didn't even know I had, and I went down a rabbit hole of looking through a folder and was like, oh, that was a nice little surprise.
Oh, I can imagine. Oh God, I'm such a huge Stevie Nicks fan. That would be amazing. Yeah, I would love to see that. Take some of your pictures and see you blow them up poster size, and then just do your abstract around the edges. That would be amazing. Oh my goodness. Give me chills thinking about that. Very cool. So let's talk about, we need to start wrapping it up. Where do you see yourself going artistically, creatively in the next 5 years? What do you see yourself wanting to accomplish? Anything on bucket list that you're looking to do?
I mean, I'm very, very thankful that I've accomplished most things that I've ever wanted to. I did a dream of mine to have a museum show one day, showcasing all these weird things that I've done. I have a ton of concert photos. I have a ton of nature photos that are really beautiful that people like. I've done tons of paintings. I have books. I've written songs. So it'd be cool to have like something where it brings it all together. And then again, even my collections, I have collections of autographs. I have collections of baseball cards. I have collections of CDs. So I have a lot of stuff that would be cool to showcase. That's the biggest plan at the moment. But I mean, yeah, I'd like to, do some gallery things. Again, just showcasing the art. It's there. I just, just waiting for the moment.
That's amazing. Well, I could just see a multimedia space for you because, like you said, you've done so many of these great things. Well, Geoffrey Dicker, it's been amazing to be able to share you with the Left of Str8 audience. Let everyone know, like I said, if they're interested in finding one of your paintings or they want to get one of your books, let them know where your website is and where they can find you on social media.
Sure. It's geoffreydicker.com. It's GeoffreyDicker.com. I'm on social media at according to G, which is the number 2. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I haven't joined Threads yet, but.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your talent with us, my friend. I really appreciate it. Stay on the line for me. Guys, we're going to have a special 5 questions with Geoffrey next Tuesday. Be sure to look for that. Going to have a lot of fun here. It's been so great talking to you, my friend. Look for other interviews right here on the Left of Str8 Show on the Left of Str8 Radio Network. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Left of Str8 Show. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast distributor, and please give us a 5-star rating so more listeners can find us. You can follow us on social media, and be sure to check out our website, www.leftofstraightradio.com, for contests and other news and information. See you next week.